All right, welcome back to Fight Talk, where we talk combat sports. My name is Austin Ullman, and we got a little middle of the week news episode here today, as well as previewing the fight night in Edmonton that we have this weekend, headlined by Brandon Moreno and Amir Albazi. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit of the fallout of UFC 308. UFC 308 took place this past weekend. Ilia Topuria defeated Max Holloway by knockout. And so now there's all these questions about what's next for Ilia, what's next for 45, and is this guy going to be active? So you can excuse maybe the first go-around. He wins the belt. He beats a guy like Volk, right? He's been waiting for this. He's been fighting. He's been beating good contenders. He beats Josh Emmett. He's been waiting for this. Now you can take 3/4 of the year off and wait. Now there's some talk that he is going to wait till the middle of 2025 to defend his title. Now, obviously, I didn't even consider this. I thought it was almost a guarantee that they just announced UFC 312. It's for Australia. Volk's from Australia. Seems like that's the fight to make. And so I just figured, hey, Volk and Ilia rematch in Australia, UFC 312. I think it's February. I forget the exact date. It might be February 12th. And so it seemed like that's where we were headed. And it appears that Ilia wants to take more time off and wait till the middle of 2025. So Diego heard that and said, okay, I want to get in there. And he wants to fight Volk at UFC 312 for the interim title, which would just, I understand what he's doing. It would be a mess. There's no reason to add an interim title where we don't need it, where there's not an injury or something like that. We've seen the way that has just been an odd situation at heavyweight and not something we want to add to a good division like 45, where we want to have a true champion, right? And so Ilia's going to force the UFC's hand here a little bit. And where they're going to say, you got to take this fight, or the UFC's going to drop back and they say, okay, you can wait. Volk will fight someone else. We'll find a matchup for you. I mean, you could have Volk and Diego fight just as a contenders fight, and then the winner of that fights Ilia. But in my opinion, that takes Volk out of the picture because Volk's not beating Diego. So, the goal here, in my opinion, is to get Volk another title shot, and it sounds like that's what Dana wanted, was to get Volk the title shot because he's more than deserving of it, right? Even if we as fans don't believe he has a single shot in that fight, he deserves it. But it seems like Ilia is not going to be the active champion. Alex Pereira is the active champion. Bilal Muhammad says he wants to be the active champion. And Ilia, it appears, is not going to take that route. He's going to take plenty of time off, which, listen, they're fighting MMA, beating the crap out of each other. I understand taking time off. And I understand as well setting a precedent for the rest of your career and saying, I'm not going to pull a Volk. You know what I mean? We might look back and say that taking that fight against Islam on 12 days' notice derailed Volk's career. And so what Ilia could be doing here is saying, I'm just going to be patient, wait my turn, not overdo this thing, even though I feel invincible. Right, not overdo it. Pereira still beat Roundtree. Pereira almost overdid it. Roundtree was up in that fight, and it was because Alex had taken one too many fights too quickly, got hurt in training. He was just forcing it a little bit. And I think Ilia right here is saying, I'm just not going to do that. We're just going to be smart with this. So the situation there is interesting and certainly something to keep an eye on. In the co-main event, obviously, we saw Robert Whittaker defeat Khamzat Chimaev. And so I talked about this on the post show, but I'll touch on it a little bit here. There's now the question of, does Sean Strickland get the title shot? The one that it seemed like it was inevitable that he was going to get, or does Khamzat Chimaev jump the line? I mean, Khamzat has had impressive victories. His last two, I mean, he beat Usman 2 fights ago, and now beat Robert Whittaker by a first-round submission. And Sean Strickland, his last 3 fights would have been a boring decision win over Paulo Costa, a loss against Dricus, and then a decision win against Izzy. So no finishes, right? And I say it often on here, this is an entertainment product, and the entertainment does need to come first. And so just something to keep an eye on there. We're going to see what happens there. I personally think you give it to Khamzat Chimaev. I've thought about this, and I just think that this is too much of an entertainment business. And Dricus, Sean Strickland, the first fight, a lot of people are like, fight of the year. That fight was not like a high-level fight by any means. And I think these are 2 high-level fighters, but that wasn't like a high-level fight, and it certainly isn't something I need to see again. I don't think Strickland won the fight, as some people did, and it's not moving the needle. Khamzat Chimaev is moving the needle. And so I think we're not in a business where merit always wins. And we are in a business where entertainment wins, and so Khamzat Chimaev here is entertainment. And let's be honest, this guy's the champion. This guy's the best fighter in the division. This guy's going to be a champion longer than Dricus or Sean Strickland or any of them will. Probably Israel Adesanya. I mean, if we as fans can all sit here and say, yeah, I mean, when he gets the title shot, he's going to become the champ, and he's going to be the champ for a while. If we can be honest with ourselves and say that, then let's just have the fight happen, right? There's no reason to waste any time, because in the UFC, things happen, right? I mean, things happen. I expected a longer title run from Sean O'Malley. Things happen. And so you can't just go out there and risk these things. And we need to get him the belt as soon as possible. So that's the main fallout from UFC 308. And so I want to preview this weekend's fight night. It's a very good fight night. A couple podcasts ago, I talked about this, and I was very frustrated with the way they did this. Derek Lewis just had a big victory on a really big fight night, a fight night that had a lot of good other fighters on it. Buckley was the co-main event in St. Louis on that one. And there was somebody else. I can't think of who it was right now, but it was a stacked fight night. Derek Lewis headlined it, got the knockout victory. This guy's a needle mover. And for some reason, he's 3 fights down now. I don't understand it. And then you've got an Apex card next week where Neil Magny is headlining. Why would you not get out of the Apex? Why would you not take Rose Namajunas, who just headlined her last fight, just headlined a fight night in Colorado? So you've got 2 people here who are not the main event, who in their last fights headlined a fight night and won those fights. Both of them won the fights, and now we're sticking them here when either of them could go headline another fight night somewhere. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. You know, maybe if the St. Louis crowd didn't sell out and there was only 7,000 people that showed up, or the Denver crowd for Rose. But no, these are sold out crowds. We can sell out anywhere we go with these people. St. Louis was like the best crowd of the year. St. Louis was better than some pay-per-views we've had this year. And that was with Derek Lewis headlining. And now we're sticking him the 3rd fight down in Canada. I mean, Canada's not the place where we're trying to stack fight nights either, right? I don't understand that. But here we are. You've got Derek Lewis and Jonata Deniz, who's 8-0, undefeated. As we check his profile, this is a heavyweight from Brazil. He's 6'4", 258. And he is a kickboxer, so this is going to be stylistically a fantastic fight. Not somebody that's going to look to take down Derek Lewis, which is the exact kind of fights that Derek Lewis needs at this point in his career. Cody Gibson, Ultimate Fighting champ, is on this card. Alexander Romanov is on this card. Jack Shore is on this card. Charles Jourdain is on this card. Mike Malott is on this card. And obviously you can see the lack of Canadian talent in the UFC right now. Which, by the way, I mean, I don't know what the future is. They've announced February for Australia, which is 312, and 310 is in Vegas. So, I mean, our last two pay-per-views in Canada were the Nunez headline, 289, I believe it was, and then 297 last year with Strickland and Dricus. I don't know what the plan is for future pay-per-views in Canada, but based on Canadian talent as a whole, it's going to be a while till we've got someone headlining pay-per-views in Canada for sure. And obviously they can't even headline fight nights yet. You got to go down to the second fight on the main card to find a Canadian. So there's only 2 Canadians on the main card. Big time issues there. You've got Mexico versus Iraq for the main event. So Derek Lewis and Denise. Derek Lewis is the underdog in this fight. He's plus 145. I disagree. I think Derek Lewis wins this fight. I think he should be the favorite. Derek Lewis should be the favorite in every single fight except for 2 reasons. Number 1, unless it's like a top dog like Tom Aspinall, John Jones. Or number 2, it's against a wrestler. A guy that can wrestle whatsoever, right? Like we saw the Almeida fight was a matchup nightmare. He never had a shot in that fight. Almeida just takes you down right away and lays on you. But obviously massive, massive problems with wrestlers. But anyone that's not named Aspinall or Jones or maybe Cyril Gane, anyone else in this division, in a straight striking matchup, I still think Derek Lewis beats. This guy has extreme power. I remember doing a podcast this summer with Jackson, and I said this was one of the top 10 boxers in the UFC. And he is. He has extreme raw power that will put you down, and I think that's what he does to Denise here. So I think he gets the victory. But as we look at the UFC rankings and we go to heavyweight, listen, you can see the situation here. Obviously, some heavyweight action coming up on our next pay-per-view in MSG. But, I mean, you look at these guys, Tuivasa, Rosenstrike, these guys that want to strike with Derek Lewis, I think he's beaten all of them at this point in his career, even still. And that's obviously the bonus of being a heavyweight fighter, is that you can go for a lot longer with Derek Lewis's style. The co-main event, Rose Namajunas and Erin Blanchfield. This is a women's flyweight event. Namajunas, it seemed like maybe was going to get the title shot after her last victory against Tracy Cortez. And then beat Amanda Ribas the fight before that. And then for Erin Blanchfield, she lost her last fight to Manuel Firo, but won her previous 4 fights before that. So women's flyweight, obviously the current champion now is Valentina Shevchenko after that title fight at UFC Noche in the Sphere. So Grasso's the number 1 contender. It seemed like maybe that fight wasn't going to happen in the Sphere and Rose was going to hop in a little bit after that Denver card. Obviously wasn't the case, but Shevchenko's the champ now. I'm still completely for Shevchenko Grasso. I'm all in for that. But it seems like the winner of this fight, so you've got Firo, who I think if Rose wins, I think either way, I think the winner gets Firo in this fight. But if Rose wins, I think that's a better fight, considering Blanchfield just lost to her. And then the other name that's been big in this division right now is Macy Barber, who I just saw has consulted 15 different doctors about this mysterious illness that she has, and she has no idea what it is. So a scary situation there. And hopefully that turns out okay, because she was moving through this division. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens there and what she figures out. Hopefully figures something out soon, because that must be worrisome for her and her team there. But I'm picking Rose Namajunas to get this done. And I think Manuel Firo is the way to go with that. And then the main event, the flyweight main event this weekend, I think this is a 7 o'clock start time as far as I know. But the main event is Brandon Moreno and Amir Albazi. So Moreno's last fight was on that Mexico fight night where he lost to Brandon Royval. And the fight before that was the title fight where he lost to Pantoja. That was on the 290 card. That was one of the fights of the year. That obviously started Pantoja's title reign. Before that, he had beat Kai Kara France and Davison Figueiredo in his little championship run there. So, and then you've got Amir Albazi on the other hand. And by the way, this is a fantastic jiu-jitsu matchup. And these main event flyweight fights are so much fun. The UFC has just shoved heavyweight fight night main events down our throats for the last so long. And these flyweight fights as main events are so much better. They deliver every time. Look at the Royval Tower fight. I mean, just a solid flyweight fight headlining an Apex card, and it turned out to be just an absolute banger. And that's what we get in all these flyweight fights. The flyweight division's fun right now. I mean, to see Kaya Sakara getting this title shot, I cannot wait for that. This is going to be an interesting time in flyweight, and I'll talk about that in a second. For Albazi, 5 straight victories. Okay, so he beat Kai Kara France June 3rd of 2023, and that was, so he's 17-1 now. That was a fight that, it was a split decision. 90% of UFC fans will tell you Kai Kara France won that fight, but Kai Kara France, even if Kai Kara France did win that fight, he's an absolute stud. He just beat Steve Irseg by knockout, and so not a bad loss, even if he did lose it, but he won. So Amir Albazi coming into this fight hot. I am picking Brandon Moreno to win this fight. I think Moreno's pace is just, it's way too big. I mean, Moreno's pace is outstanding. And it's right up there with the kind of pace we see with Royval and with Pantoja. And I think that's too much of an issue in this fight, and I just think he's too good of a fighter to lose 3 straight fights like this. He's such a good flyweight, and I honestly hope we can see Moreno and Pantoja again. That is such a fantastic battle between those guys. And, I mean, at flyweight in the top 5, 6, I mean, there's a reason Kaya Sakara is getting the title shot. There's a reason Steve Irseg got the title shot. It's a division where it seems like everybody's fought everybody. One other thing, Manel Cape just signed a fight I saw. My personal favorite flyweight, so I'm excited to see what happens there. That was in the December 14th Tampa card, I believe. So we go to flyweight. Pantoja's the champ. Royval's the number 1 challenger. Kaya Sakara is getting his UFC debut in a title shot. And then Moreno, number 2. Albazi, 3. Kai Kara France, 4. So Kai Kara France will certainly fight on that card in Australia, UFC 312. I just don't see any other way about it. Tatsuro Taira obviously just lost to Royval. He looked good. I mean, he'll be back. He looked really good. You can see the talent there. And then beyond that, I think the only other name that's big, I mean, Steve Irseg, he got knocked out. I still think this guy's an absolute stud. So Steve Irseg will be back. Cape, there's a lot of issues there. Obviously, Makayev is out of the division now. So the big names are KKF, Albazi. So let's just talk Moreno, Albazi. I'm picking Moreno to win. So let's just say that Moreno wins. I personally think if you go Kai Kara France, Brandon Royval in Australia, I think that makes a ton of sense because Pantoja's defending against Asakara on UFC 310. So that's only 2 pay-per-views after that. And then the winner of that, let's say Pantoja defends. I'll pick Asakara in that fight, by the way. But let's just say Pantoja defends. Now you've got a situation where you've got Moreno, which Moreno coming off a win, I think people would be fine with giving it to him just because of how good the history for one between those two and how good the fights have been between them. And then you've got a scenario between Kai Kara France and Brandon Royval. Brandon Royval's looked really good, and so people weren't fired up to see that rematch right away. Now I think Royval, after a couple wins, he wants the title shot again. Kai Kara France more than deserves it. People think he beat Albazi and just dominated Steve Irseg. So a moment ago in this division, it felt like none of these fights made sense. We're getting to a point where all of the fights make sense again, where Moreno makes sense, Kai Kara France makes sense, Tar is going to be there in no time, Royval makes sense, right? So I think we're headed back into a good division, and Irseg picks off a win or two, and people are going to want to see him fight Pantoja again. With that being said, I think Asakara is going to beat Pantoja. And so that kind of flips this division upside down, and now it's a new wave of guys. But it feels like that's what we need in this division, is a new wave of guys, and I think Asakar is going to bring that. And like I said, Tetsuro Tara looked really good in that last fight. So I am picking Moreno, Thug Rose Namajunas, and Derek Lewis. I'm just picking those 3 fights. The rest of them are pretty iffy. The PFL, I'm not sure if the PFL has an event this weekend. They do not. They're off until November 29, it looks like, when they head back to Saudi. So that's it for this weekend. Boxing-wise, there's nothing this weekend. The 9th in boxing, we have Boots Ennis. And then obviously the 15th, Mike Tyson, Jake Paul. In the UFC, we have this. And then Neil Magny headlines next week in the Apex. And then the week after that is obviously John Jones and Stipe Miocic, which I'm going to drop a podcast about soon because Ariel Helwani talked about this past week. If there's any fight in the last couple of years where everyone's just forgotten that it's an actual fight, where everyone's picked one person, it is this fight. And Ariel said, this is a 50-50 fight. I want to talk about that. I'm hoping to drop a podcast maybe this weekend about that because that's interesting. A lot of people forget that Stipe Miocic is even entering the octagon that night. People are just figuring that John Jones is going to win this fight. Stipe Miocic is the heavyweight GOAT. And, I mean, yes, he's had a lot of time off, but he's still a dominant UFC heavyweight. And so in all this talk about Jones and Aspinall and Pereira and all these guys, people have forgotten that Stipe Miocic is the GOAT of this division. So that's going to be interesting. And I want to dig into that before the event, before the week of the event, because that's a fascinating conversation. But I will hopefully post Saturday night. I will have a show recapping this fight night. I'm excited for that. But the month of November, especially the 15th and the 16th, I mean, I can't think of a better back-to-back Friday night, Saturday night, Mike Tyson, Jake Paul, and then UFC 309. I can't think of a better back-to-back in my time as a combat sports fan. And I don't think there is one. So that's going to be fantastic. A lot of good things being announced for December as well. But for now, my name is Austin Ullman, and thank you for tuning in to Fight Talk.